Welcome back to American Arms Channel, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Drake. Today, as you can tell by the title of the video, we're going to be discussing my final review, with an asterisk, my final review and thoughts on the Browning Gold 10, specifically the Gold 10 Light or Field. But first, if you're not a subscriber and you'd like to stay up to date on everything here at American Arms Channel, whether that's firearms review, reloading videos, how-tos with disassembly and reassembly of firearms, as well as just run-of-the-mill waterfowl and deer hunting videos and turkey hunting, the likes, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and make sure you hit the notification bell so that you can stay up to date. With the analytics the way they are these days with Google and YouTube, it's kind of hard to make sure that you see the content you want to without hitting that notification bell. So other than that, make sure you hit like or dislike and give me a comment down below to let me know what you thought of the video. But now that standard affair is out of the way, let's get talking about this guy. Now today we are on location in Nebraska following up some snow goose adventures, which turned out to not be so much decoying or pass shooting, but jump shooting snow geese. So you may or may not see videos of that. But the 2021 season was good to me in a lot of ways and terrible in others. And please excuse the wind noise. We are out in the plains of Nebraska. But anyhow, when it comes to the Gold 10, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that I have had a love-hate relationship with it, and I definitely have a hate relationship when it comes to Browning. So, you know, let's get into some of the Spark Notes versions of my experience with it, and maybe give you an opinion on, if you haven't seen it, if you just stumbled across this video, what to think of and maybe what to look for if you're interested in a semi-automatic 10 gauge, specifically the Gold 10. Now, the Gold 10 has been around for quite some time. It was introduced to the American market as a brand new model in 1993. So the gun has been around longer than I have been alive, by 1 year. So saying that, you would think it's fairly dated, and it is, and it might be obsolescent, but it's not obsolete. But when initially introduced, the gun was produced with a steel receiver. While slightly more trim in form and function, it definitely was heavier. The original Golds had a 10+ pound weight, especially with the longer bird barrels. Now, they could have been had in 30, 28, 26, and eventually special 24-inch barrel models. Of course, gunsmiths can modify barrels here and there and everywhere, so used models will vary depending upon prior owners and whoever has gotten their grubby little mitts on modifying that specific firearm. But in general, the steel receivers were produced from 1993 till the late 90s, early 2000s. But out of the Gold series, the Gold 10 is the first one. Based on the Super X design, it uses a very, very unique and distinctive tilting bolt and camming bolt body or bolt carrier system, which you will recognize from the modern Maxxis Silver SX3 and SX4, and of course the SX2, which was essentially the Winchester version of the Browning Gold 12 and Gold 12 Super Magnum. But by function, this gun is not identical, as I just said. The gas system is not an active valve gas system. In fact, it's more akin to a long stroke or tappet gas system than it is an active valve. It has a gas seal ring that goes up inside of the gas block, or the barrel ring / gas block, and it utilizes several rings like you would find on an AR-15 or AR-10 direct gas impingement or internal piston bolt to operate the action. Side note, don't worry about those ring gaps lining up. They're not going to bleed energy and deprive you of proper cycling. You couldn't control that anyways, as they will rotate through operation. Just a side note, have had people comment and be concerned about that before. Same thing goes for ARs and AR-10s. But the reasoning behind that is, I guess a 10 gauge operates at fairly standardized pressures and only has to worry about 3.5-inch Magnum loads. And there's some caveats to that you can make this a 2-shot 2 7/8 inch gun anyhow. That gas operation is all fine and dandy, but it definitely can overdrive the bolt at times, and you will absolutely feel that as that bolt hits the rear of the receiver, which is another point of difference between Golds and Super X's, that while they all rely on some sort of form of buffering the bolt as it slams home into the back of the receiver before returning forward or locking open on the last shot, this one utilizes a steel plate up against a hard rubber buffer. Now that buffer is expendable, and when it runs out or it starts to crumble, it's going to cause some problems at some point. So if you own a Gold 10 or you're looking to buy one, I would highly suggest that one of your common replacement parts to put into your inventory would be some of those buffers, and not just one, but a couple, because you never know when something's going to go out of production and you're going to be left high and dry. And under $10, it's not a big expense, but it is something to keep in mind that's not exactly in line as a common wear component like action springs and trigger springs for most modern autoloaders. Unlike other designs such as the Ithaca Mag 10 and Browning SP10, the only other semi-automatic 10 gauges ever available commercially, this gun will hold more than 3 shots. With a limiter plug for waterfowl hunting or other hunting purposes, of course, it only holds 3, 2 in the tube and 1 in the chamber. However, it is an open magazine design and will allow you to put 4 in the tube, and if you buy a Briley extension, you can put 8 in it. So, pretty cool deal there, and I will eventually have a Briley extension tube for this gun. But this gun does offer you a much higher capacity, which is pretty cool. Why do you need a 5-shot 10 gauge or a 8-shot 10 gauge if you buy the extension tube? I don't know, but I'm not in the business of justifying needs or wants. It's just cool, if nothing else. As far as everything goes for operations, it's pretty standard affair. You have in front of the trigger guard safety, which, as you know, there's either a safety in front or behind. Many people prefer it behind, while just as many people will argue that it's better in front and more intuitive. While I do have a slight preference towards the rear safeties, I couldn't give a crap less. This functions great. It has extremely positive detent in it, and if you so desired, you could potentially swap this to the left as far as the design looks. Now, have I seen anybody do that? No, but it looks like it could be a swappable affair. So I'll let you play with that, as I'm a righty and I don't need to. Other than that, there is one loading quirk. Like pre-1953 Browning automatic 5s, you're going to find that that lifter doesn't want to go up. And there's a reason for that, and that's the simplicity of the trigger mechanism. Is it really something that they should have worked through, especially after 27 years of production? Yes, I think by now we should have a redesign where we at least get a standard lifter style, if not the Browning speed feed style. For cripe's sake, it's only been around since 1953, and they've incorporated it on both the the A5, the current production A5, as well as the Maxus, and the Silver has a standard tilting feed. And if you look at the design of their trigger packs, while they are not 10 gauge sized in the 20 or 12s, obviously, they are close enough that that same technology, that same design principle could be brought over to this gun without severe modification to the rest of the receiver. Why they doesn't, I don't know. I guess it's because this doesn't offer enough of a market to them. They got it done in 1993, and I guess they consider it completely done now. So, strike against Browning right there. But you do press the bolt release button, or the slammer button as some people affectionately call it, and you force it upwards, whether that is with a shell, like so, or by hand. Once it's up, you'll notice that I don't have to press it again. I don't have to hold it to keep it up. I can load the tube, I can charge the firearm if I need to, or I can just leave it up if I've already put one in the chamber. Upon cycling, it will drop. Some people will say that malfunctions can occur. I've never experienced it, and I've put hundreds of rounds through this gun, and many times in the field while hunting, I have left it up after recharging the tube. Never had a malfunction with it. So, there is that. Now, other than that particular quirk, it's quite a bit like the other Super X and Gold variants as far as takedown goes, and there is a takedown and reassembly video on the channel if you're interested in seeing that. Check out the link to the Browning Gold 10 playlist in the description below. You'll notice if you've been looking online that this gun has different furniture than the current production or the most recent production run of the Browning Gold 10. And that's because in 2020 they gave it a facelift. Now I call it a facelift because they didn't do anything besides replace the stocks. It is the same gun functionally. In fact, all the steel receiver and aluminum receiver variants have the same exact components. Other than the receiver, all components for the Gold 10 are interchangeable, and that's why you'll see me refer to this as the G10 or Gold 10, even though it is a light or field model. They're all the same, with the exception of barrels, stocks, and finishes. The function of the firearm is identical. With that said, I will say this. The biggest hurdle to the reliability in the G10 is going to be quality control at Browning. There are plenty of horror stories online, mine is one of them. Now, if you are inspecting a used model or a new model, I highly recommend that you check several areas before purchase, and I will go into that in detail in just a moment. But other than that, the gun is fairly solid. It's a hefty piece at 9.5 pounds, but with a 10 gauge Magnum, especially when you're running full 10 gauge potential cartridges, you're going to need that heft. And before you become intimidated by the 10 bore, just know that the G10 offers you 3-inch 12 gauge Magnum light gun recoil in a gun that is able to fire heavy duty 10 gauge Magnums. And instead of becoming a sharp rap to the shoulder and cheek, it's more of a gentle push and bop. When you learn how to manage the recoil out of the G10, you'll really be onto something. The action is super fast, and when it's reliable, you can rip off 5 rounds incredibly fast. It's very intuitive to shoulder. The ramp into the rib profile as well as the squat bead gives you an excellent sight picture as you're staring down a bird at long range, at least long range for wing shooting. And that's where this gun is going to excel. Because do you need a 10 gauge at 20-yard goose decoying ranges? No. At 40? No. At 50? Maybe. At 60 and 70? Yes. But how many of us are actually going to do that? So once again, you need to justify your need. You don't need to justify your need in this. It's just awesome to run super heavy 10 gauge Magnum loads. For example, this #1 shot Boss shot shells 2 1/16 ounce load at 1,300 feet per second is a true 10 gauge Magnum load, and it puts the honkers down. Is it too much for a duck? Absolutely, but it really does, when choked appropriately, have the potential to down birds, and big birds at that, at decent if not exceptional ranges for a shotgun. So as a 10 gauge, it serves all of its purposes perfectly. But out of the box, I'm still going to warn you, it may not be perfect. You're going to have to play with it, and you're not going to want to rely on Browning to fix anything if something's wrong with it. So save yourself the headache and the heartache now, and get that through into your mind that, you know what, I might have to send this to somebody who knows what they're doing, or I might have to fix it myself if it doesn't work, if I end up getting a lemon, or if I don't do my due diligence and look for these problems before buying one. And I know in-store buying is not always a thing nowadays, but at least inspecting before you pick it up could be. So where are your primary areas to look for? #1, picking it up, if it's assembled, barrel fit. If you have slop in the barrel and the barrel nut is all the way down and you pull forward back and you get a little tiny movement or a lot of movement, your barrel fit's not proper. What does this mean? Well, if you're going to fix it, you're either going to need a new forearm or you need to simply shim the forearm. You could also JB weld the contact points in the forearm, and once hard, trim it down until it provides a perfect fit. I've gone with just shimming it for this season, for last year. Eventually I will go the JB Weld trick route, but until then, it's not a big deal. One thing you will notice is that the rib is a little bit loose compared to other guns, and that is because of the design of the rib. It runs off of a C-channel in post design. It will be a little bit wobbly. Is it ideal? No. It's cheap, and that's why Browning does it. It is not going to be perfect, and you know, for a guy like me who prefers stuff like Benelli's, typically in inertia guns, this rib style is very annoying. Does it look good? Yes. Is it wiggly and wobbly? Yes. Does it affect the shootability of the gun or the accuracy or patterning of the gun? No, not at all. And if it does, it's not noticeable, but definitely not what I would expect out of a $1,500 to $2,000 shotgun brand new. Next, you're going to want to look for bolt drag. You can see mine here. A lot of these guns will have this. If it's excessive out of the box, just from racking the action back and forth, you might need to trim that down or just let it wear in. But that can retard the bolt a little bit too much and right out of the box potentially cause short cycling issues. Just depends upon how hard it is, the inside of that receiver is pressing against that bolt carrier. Next, you're going to want to look at the barrel extension. If it's super rough on the inside, and you can see mine is a little shiny, that's from me, not from Browning, then it might cause you problems. You want to look at your feed ramp area. Again, mine is super polished and reprofiled. That's from me, not out of the box from Browning. And of course, your chamber. If you look inside, and a little bit of oil or a little bit of grime from packaging and shipping from overseas, again, this is a Moroku Japan produced shotgun for Browning, well, then you're going to run into an issue where, you know, do I need to clean that up before I can evaluate the chamber? That's fine. But if it's not a mere polish or you see some ringing, some tool marking, you've got a problem that's going to have to be honed and polished, and that's going to be a big problem with cycling for certain shells, especially Cheddite shells like used in Boss shot shells and some of the Warwolf Ordnance offerings. Plus, Cheddites typically, when loading components are available, if you're loading yourself, are going to be the shell that you're going to want to use, because typically they're most available and typically they're cheapest priced, and they're a pretty good shell for 1 or 2 firings, but honestly, the Remington or the Federal hulls are a better hull in general. I digress. Now, another fix that is something that can be done is increasing the extractor tension. I would feel that out in store, but honestly, I would consider that an extractor spring might be something to be replaced on one of these guns if you're getting it used. Next, you want to feel the tension out. If you're not used to a Gold 10, they have a lot of spring tension in the action. So taking significant effort to rack it should be there. If it's loose, it needs new springs. If it's incredibly difficult, probably has some gum in it, probably needs to be cleaned out, or there might be a bound up spring, so keep in mind. But those are your main areas to check for general fit and fit issues that will affect reliability. Other than that, general terms apply of just looking the gun over and make sure it's not trashed. Whether it's brand new or not, unfortunately, I have to put that caveat on this design. Perhaps one of the most important things to know about the G10 is that a lot of its functional issues are going to come from spring tension, whether that's magazine tube spring tension, extractor spring tension, or action spring tension. Failures to extract, eject, feed, or go back home into battery, or simply failures to you know, again, eject because of too slow or too fast of bolt velocity are going to be highly dependent upon those springs. Spring tube, extractor, action. So those 3 areas are your primary concerns. The trigger springs, the hammer springs are typically fine. There's not really an aftermarket replacement for those, but again, I would buy a couple of firing pin or hammer springs just to make sure everything's kosher throughout the life of the shotgun for you. The action in this gun is incredibly fast, but wear and tear will definitely cause a problem over time with those springs. And the horribly designed action spring system just frankly needs to be replaced. But there is a solution for that, and that is the SureCycle BRN003 SureCycle kit. And that will allow for you to replace the OEM style, which frankly makes taking the stock off a pain in the butt, and really servicing the gun just an issue in general, and turns it into a stainless steel, corrosion resistant, highly durable system. So if you replace that action spring system with the SureCycle kit, which is incredibly simple to do, really you only need a blowtorch and a pair of vice grips or a vise, and you can get it spun off, and then an all-16ths crescent wrench will spin the new one right on without any Loctite, and you are in game. So lots of ways to upgrade the gun functionally. Again, when I replaced my springs, I replaced the action spring. I added an additional nested spring to the extractor spring because I didn't have time to find one at the time, and it's worked great. I highly recommend you just get one from Wolf Springs. Get a Wolf Springs extra power 12 gauge magazine tube spring. Cut it to whatever length makes sense for fitting it inside this tube. And then of course the SureCycle spring, or excuse me, SureCycle kit for the action will really help this gun out. The next modification you may need to make your gun run reliably is honing and polishing the chamber, and there is a video on the channel demonstrating that and the results. So once that's all done, if you have those issues, and once I resolve those issues with my gun, where did I end up? I had a bad taste in my mouth, to be honest, and Browning didn't help that at all. I swear I'll never buy another Browning firearm again. Asterisk on that, new. I'll never buy a new Browning firearm. They'll never get money directly from me. And I'll never say that a Browning shotgun is really something to covet. But this is kind of the only game in town when it comes to a brand new 10 gauge, other than its sister, the BPS 10, which, surprise, is another Browning. But it gets the job done, and honestly, I have come to like this gun so much that I kind of want to take it hunting more than my Benellis, which is a terrible thing to say almost. I want to wash my tongue out with dirt and say 100 Hail Marys after that, but honestly, the gun with the old ergonomics, I can't speak for the new stock design, it feels great. It shoulders very well. I'm a large frame shooter, and this is a large frame shooter gun. So don't go into this expecting, if you're a smaller guy, that out of the box this stock style is going to fit you. It's just a solid piece when it's tuned up or when it's functioning correctly out of the box. So there is that asterisk, unfortunately. But my impressions are that when built correctly, it's a really solid piece. It really runs well. When tuned up right, and I'll slip a shell in here just for you to hear, she runs super smooth. I'll insert some video at some point in this review so you can see her operating, maybe even at slow-mo. But yeah, I really like the gun. Loading quirks, since I didn't cover it before, the gun operates off of a control round feed style system, identical to, if not incredibly similar to, the original Auto 5, being that there is a control round feed tab, and it's what I'm going to call it. I don't know what the actual name is, but it is located right up here on the bottom of the bolt head. And that is where, if I take a shell and insert it, you can see that it hangs up. Now, as it's feeding, as the bolt travels rearward, you can see that shell comes back, which means if I cycle it slowly, it kind of hangs up there, and I have to press the bolt release to get it to go. So speed is this shotgun's friend when it comes to cycling. So there is that. Unloading is very simple. If you are charged, you simply need to lift the load gate, come in, press the shell forward, press that tab down, and let it go, and out will come your shell. It'll take a second to practice, but once you've got it, you've got it. So there is that quirk. Offhand loading is not going to be incredibly simple, but I find that if you grab with your offhand, for me that's my left hand, You press the shell into the bottom of the lifter pressing also the hull's base into the back, or excuse me, the front of the trigger assembly. Push the button at the same time and up. Of course, I'm trying to do it on camera, so it's much more janky. Once it's up, it's in the recess. I can now slip my thumb forward as I rotate my hand over and push it in, and subsequent rounds easily travel into the tube. A note on patterning, and that is, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail other than a 10 gauge patterns large shot very, very well. But just like any interchangeable choke gun, patterning is going to be entirely dependent upon the load components, the consistency of that load, the choke tube and how it interacts with that load. Shotgunning is always a combination of gun, load, choke. And for me to say, oh, this just patterns beautifully with everything you throw through it, it may for me, it may not for you, because everything I throw through it or everything you throw through it is not going to be the same. In fact, gun to gun, choke to choke, you could buy the same exact gun, a 2018 produced Browning Gold 10 with no modifications to the barrel other than polishing up the chamber, and insert a Carlson's improved modified 10 gauge Browning and Vector choke tube in it, and take Boss shot shells 2 1/16 ounce 1300 foot per second number ones and fire it at a target at 40 yards and end up with a similar result, or you could end up with a completely different result than I get. There's even so much to say that the subjective nature of what is a good pattern for me in my applications may not be a good pattern for you in your applications. So I'm not going to comment too heavily on patterning with this shotgun. It's your responsibility to pick a choke or play with chokes and pick a load that makes sense for your applications and will work for your purposes. And of course, put it on paper long before you ever put it on a bird. I have chosen this choke combination for most of my waterfowl needs with the 10 gauge and with the Boss load because that's what I choose to shoot at waterfowl. Caveat is this snow goose season out here in Nebraska, I've pretty much just run steel. In fact, I've only run steel, and what I've run is 1350 foot per second Winchester XX ounce and 5/8 BB. It did a great job. It knocked the crap out of some crows and it put snows on the ground. But I wasn't shooting snows at 70 yards with it. So depending upon your application, you're going to have to pick a load and choke, and you're going to have to pattern it and just find out, is it going to work for you? For me, my combination works for my purposes. A lot of times I don't take shots at geese past 55 yards. And some days when I think I need a 10 gauge, I end up being able to get by if I had brought the 28 gauge. So does it matter? I don't know, but I'm enjoying my time with the 10 gauge, and I'm sure you will too if you're interested in the 10 gauge. So I'll leave that at that. Pattern your gun with your chokes, with your load. I will say I've achieved some very impressive results with this gun in different load and choke combinations so far, so I wouldn't worry about modifications to the barrel. It's a big bore, you've got big chokes and a lot of choking options. Compared to a 12 gauge even, you can go from complete cylinder at 770, 775 all the way down to stinking 0.680 inches for your purposes. So the sky's the limit, and there's a crap load of chokes out there for this gun's choke system, as well as the BPS 10, which uses the same. Now, final comments. Again, if you're shopping for one, make sure you look for all those parts. Barrel fit and finish of the inside of the receiver, fit and finish of the barrel extension of the chamber, spring tensions, etc. Just to evaluate and know what you might have to do to it, or you might run into issues later. And also, one thing I can tell you is that my production year, the 2017, 2018 production years, are absolutely problem children. They did not produce any in 2019, and the 2020 is the new run by most all accounts, the 2020 models are very high quality and they have not had functional issues. However, after this season, maybe we'll see some reports countering that. I have seen at least one where a brand new gun was not running properly with the Bosch shells, a Cheddite hull, and the remedy was honing and polishing the chamber. Again, your chamber on any firearm, on any shotgun, if it is rough, it will cause a problem eventually. Many guys who say, you know, do this trick, do that trick, super clean, super dirty, whatever it may be with the Gold 10, you know, it's because they did a rain dance, they made some decision about how some little quirky thing was going to make the gun run. They shot a magazine and said, oh, it runs, it's beautiful, perfect. Put it in the left hand corner of the westernmost, you know, room in the house and it'll be fine forever. I'm sorry to say that's not the case. When it comes to mechanical items, you actually need to perform mechanical operations to remedy operational issues. In this gun, spring tension and polishing is a big thing. So, if you want to deal with Browning's customer service, you can send it into them, absolutely. If you want to do it yourself, you can do that as well, but just go into buying one of these knowing it may not be perfect and it may take some work to get it there. But once it's there, damn is it a great gun. Damn is it addictive, and damn does it just scream take me hunting. Now, am I done modifying this gun? Absolutely not. It's going to get the finish stripped off of it, at least for the receiver and barrel, and it's going to get coated in something like a burnt bronze or perhaps a coyote tan. Not entirely positive yet whether I'm going to do that myself or have a professional do that, but we will see. And that's my last comment, is that after 1 year of ownership, exactly, from February to February, this gun's kind of rough looking. It looks like a well-used shotgun. It looks a lot older, a lot more used than 1 year of use, and I honestly have not treated this any better or worse than my Super Black Eagle 3. I've had my Super Black Eagle 3 since November of 2017 as of this video, and it has equal to or less wear than this gun that I have had for a year, and I've been using this gun equally as much in the first year's ownership as I did the SVE3. The Benelli simply has a better hydro dip finish. That's where it is, guys. So take it or leave it. As far as accessories go, you're looking at pretty limited. Choke tubes are going to be the most plentiful. You have the upgrade components like the BRN03, general shotgun accessories like the Beartooth products, stock padding system, stock sleeve where you can pad it up or down for cheek comfort, as well as line of sight. Has, you know, you can get shell holders or not. I like the shell holder version, works for me. Slings, of course, universal products are around, but gun specific like a new charging handle, no, not really there. You're gonna have to have your favorite machinist make one up, or you need to start bothering companies like Briley, Rob Roberts, Grumpy Duck, etc. to make you one. Now, there's reports that Grumpy Duck is going to make one in the year 2021. Not going to hold my breath for that. Probably going to find a solution on my own or make one on my own before I wait for that to happen. So there is that. This review is getting long-winded, and the sun is beginning to dim in overcast central Nebraska, so I'm going to wrap it up. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it gave you some talking points, some things to think on when it comes to considering a Gold 10 for your 10 gauge scattergun needs. Now, if you'd like to read a full in-depth and not the Spark Notes version of this review, I would encourage you to go down to the description. You'll find the All Things That Go Bang blog site link. That'll take you to the article that I wrote in January, February of this year, that is titled The Browning Gold 10 Light/Field, the Good, the Bad, and the Monstrously Hideous. That article is going to give you a complete rundown on this gun, my issues, the remedies, and a full review, instead of me just sitting out here in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, babbling on about a shotgun that I love and hate at the same time. So, as always, guys, God bless, keep your powder dry. I'll see you in the next video.